final panel for the keynote discussion. Let's get some energy, maybe a round of applause. So it is my great pleasure to introduce the chair of this next session, Jesi Carson. I've worked with Jesi for about 2 years now, and I've learned so much from her, so this is very exciting. And she'll be leading the panel on deliberative democracy and human rights, innovations from below.
Thanks, Maya. Hi, everybody. Everybody have a good lunch. Awesome. I did. So I'm joined in person here with my good friend Sadi, and Johannah, her co-author, is online. And we're being joined by Lydia and Sindiso online as well. I think our panel is on deliberative democracy and participatory governance and human rights, so that's okay. I'll do that. First, there we go. I guess we'll get started. Do we have timekeepers in the back, or am I just going to do that with my phone here? Got it? Great. We'll do both. How about that? All right, thanks, folks. Yeah, again, my name is Jesi Carson. I'm really excited to be here. I found this program so far to be really invigorating and enriching for my own practice, and I'm hoping I can give something back from my practice to this field. First, I'd like to acknowledge the lands of McMaster University on the Mississauga and Moshonie First Nations lands governed by the dish with one spoon, as we learned yesterday, Wampum Agreement. I also come from Canadian lands of the Motsuenyane, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, which is on the Pacific Coast, known as Vancouver. Yeah, I think I'm trying to make a practice of connecting to land as my one form of kind of small scale resistance. So I invite everyone to take just one, maybe like 20 seconds right now to think about a way that you connected to the land recently. That can be anything. It can be like, oh, I saw some beautiful wildlife, or the leaves falling from the trees and the change of season and how that's sitting with you. So anything that comes to mind, just briefly, taking a deep breath and sort of settling in as a practice. Yeah, I think I would say mine was going for a really beautiful run yesterday or the day before through this town that I don't know very well, and going a walk through the forest, seeing some of the nature that Hamilton has to offer. So yeah, I'm a designer. Human rights is not my field, but I've worked with Participedia for quite a few years, and so I'm pretty deep into the democratic innovation space. And I connect participatory design with that through the work that I do. So I'll get into it. I'm gonna make this go forward. Yeah. So as I mentioned, Participedia is kind of one of my day jobs. I also work with an organization, a nonprofit in Vancouver called the Vancouver Design Nerds, and that's the case studies in the paper are mostly rooted in that work. I work with the Global Classroom for Democracy Innovation, which is like a pedagogical approach using design thinking to connect universities in different countries and students. And yeah, I mostly use design as a way to connect people in collaboration, as opposed to maybe designing concrete artifacts or products. I align with people like this who think in a similar way about moving design into a space of activism, plurality, emergent strategy, relationality, decolonial scholarship, feminist scholarship, stuff like that. A few of those are in the paper. Particularly though, I would call out design justice as a real opportunity space that this field can probably learn from, which brings design into a space of rethinking how people who are normally marginalized by design can be brought into the center. So this idea of amplifying and centering effective communities and voices, and we've heard a lot about that in the last couple of days. Has a lot of potential. And yeah, just this, related to that, that's kind of the space of my paper, and kind of responding to the call for presentations here about connecting or finding ways across the kind of boundary or gap that exists between these kind of universalized international human rights frameworks and then the actual local voices and experiences of people on the ground. I also kind of underline this with my philosophy that everything is designed and everyone's a designer. It's kind of like the underlying theme of the work that I do. So yeah, I mentioned Participedia. It's a really cool resource. Check it out. It's got thousands of examples of participatory democratic processes and case studies and methods, way beyond citizens assemblies. That's only just one of a giant spectrum of different types of participation that can happen, that can be drawn upon. The range is massive. It goes from like very grassroots and local and community rooted stuff to like top down UN level, like organized participation. So it's a big, broad thing. What else did I want to say about that? Yeah, just to positioning participatory design as kind of one of these things, one element, one approach, let's say, to engaging communities, not the only way by any means. So this kind of exploratory axis is how I was trying to wrap my head around how I was going to contribute from my field to this field, thinking about that scale of grassroots or local to institutional or global as kind of one part of the axis. And then this idea of how participatory engagement, whether that's through design or other means, can kind of oscillates between being reflective and like looking at things in a critical way. How is it working, or the data that needs to be collected, and also making things or like creating systems or changing the world or making new policies, action-oriented stuff. So that's the kind of scale. And so participatory engagement, I'm kind of putting in the grassroots level, though it does span all the way, as I mentioned, to global, but that the work that I do is more in the grassroots kind of local space. And I've also been looking at systems change as kind of frameworks to bring into the work that I do locally, but also thinking about how the local work can apply globally. So it's more exploratory in this paper right now. I'm kind of new in that, but I thought I would bring it in just for fun and as a way to get into it for myself. Yeah, I mentioned, so I'm going to focus, that's the focus of my paper and the case studies is in this side of the axis. I added these slides last minute. I'm hoping this is helpful. Design thinking is kind of not super well known to everyone. So I thought I'd bring in a little bit about what that is and how it works quickly. But it does a lot of great things, has good benefits, like it's fun as well, which is great. But it does engage participants really well, creative confidence build, getting unstuck, and very collaborative. It also helps to just frame the problem. I think this image, like we use this in almost all of the events that we do. It's like, wow, the thing is big. We're looking at wicked problems, right? How can we use the tools of design and other modes of democratic innovations to frame the problem and then iterate and try things so that you're not jumping to conclusions too quickly. It's also, there's some characteristics of design thinking. Since I've jumped into the field, it's human-centered, collaborative, optimistic, experimental. These things are all still true. This is coming from like a pretty well-known design consultancy called IDEO, but it's like 10-year-old ideas. So we're, as designers, we iterate on the field. We're bringing in some fresh ideas and thinking. A lot of these characteristics are still similar, but it's, I think this kind of activist framing is important, at least from my perspective, looking at relational approaches rather than centering just on humans. There's a lot more than humans to the world. It's an ecosystem. We all exist in together. Decolonization, awareness of bias and power, these kinds of things are really important, I think, in design. Also being led by communities, not just community engaged, but how our communities actually doing the work themselves, and we're not coming in as experts telling them what to do. Again, Emergent Strategy is such a good book. Adrienne Marie Brown's amazing. And like this approach to facilitation, I find really inspiring. It's like, how do you not have a plan? How can the community generate its own plan? It's hard as a person who likes process and likes to facilitate. I'm like, I need to know exactly what I'm doing. So challenging, but good. And it's also this idea of experimentation, iterating and prototyping in an ongoing way is kind of, yeah, but also the importance of reflection within that and like, how can we do better? This is kind of what it looks like in reality. It's a bit messy coming from ambiguity to clarity, but it's actually quite systematized. If you use the tools and methods of design, it can help you quite in a streamlined way go from collecting a lot of information, a lot like research, and then making choices, synthesizing, and finding pathways to new ideas and generative things through that work. This is called the double diamond design process. The UK Design Council coined this. And it's, I can't go into it at the time, but there's a lot of methods and tools and mindsets within each of these phases that are, again, for this kind of methodical creativity. It's a great approach. I would look it up if you're interested. And just to say that it's iterative, you're never kind of like going in one straight line. You're always coming back and looking at what you've done and building upon stuff. So that's my design thinking 101. Feel free to chat with me about it later. The case studies I look at in the paper are from 3 projects that I've done personally in Vancouver. with the Vancouver Design Nerds and another organization called Basic Design. They're all in partnership with local NGOs, and they all work with equity deserving communities in a workshop setting. And these are all one-off workshops, so I'll caveat that. I do think that this work can be improved if you do more sustained engagements over time, but these are the case studies that I'm talking about for the purposes of this. Quickly, I don't think I'm gonna go through all of them, but just a couple to give you an idea of what the work looks like. The Binners Project is an organization that works with bottle collectors in Vancouver who've sort of formed a community supported by local activists and formed an NGO to advocate for themselves and destigmatize this work in the city. So that I was approached by a member of this organization because I'm a designer and I'm an industrial designer as well, to redesign this kind of box idea. They had this idea for a binner box that you would install in the laneway. So it was easier for the binners to come by and just like grab the bottles. And you may have seen this, like people do this on a kind of ad hoc. It just happens and people set it up, but they wanted to formalize it and like put their branding on it. And they were like, you're a designer, can you like make us a nice box? And so my partner and I said, we totally could do that, but it's probably better if we first chat with the binners and the people who are going to be using the boxes in a setting where they can talk to each other and decide what the issues might be, overcome some of the kind of problems that you could see happening with this box. The cost of the thing was actually a big issue, and the interaction. And so the idea for a hook came out of this workshop that we ended up facilitating, which solved a lot of those problems, which, you know, making it a lot more cost effective. And it wasn't like a hard thing to do. It was one meeting, you know, like, and this is possible, and it made quite a big difference in the organization. So a little thing can have a lot of impact. The studies connected to human rights themes, obviously. I haven't gone through the process of looking at all of the articles specifically that it touches on, but these are the themes that I'm able to identify in the work, and some of the reflections. Learning that came out of that particular case was the importance of lived experience. The binners' viewpoints mattered a lot, and this kind of setting where the residents of the community and the binners could just talk to each other, and there wasn't a hierarchy there, and both of their ideas mattered, which was pretty significant and important in this case. Again, this idea of small scale impact that can be scalable. This hub project has expanded to other provinces as well. So the UBC Transformative Health and Justice case study, this is working with our research cluster at UBC, who does work with people who have experience in the criminal justice system in BC. They do a lot of really cool work, but their cluster was feeling that they needed to kind of reconnect. They were spreading out a bit. They needed to focus their work. They wanted to find ways to be a bit more strategic and targeted in the projects that they were working on and things like that. So we use some creative design methods and drawing on things like metaphor to open up the space for storytelling and map insights from that community, including the peers who were actively involved in the research cluster work, to come into the space and collectively gather the information that they needed to make sort of strategic planning decisions and project-based decisions and create some future goals for themselves. So one of the methods we used were these kind of little name tag cards, which are super simple, like so everyone could articulate the gifts that they were bringing to the research cluster community, and as well as they would choose a visual metaphor card that represented for them what the cluster was, and it was just a whole bunch of kind of abstract images. And we heard a story in circle from every single person. It wasn't a case where you had to go to breakouts. It was like we wanted to hear what everyone had to say. And we documented that with sticky notes during the circle and had people come up, and we worked together to kind of organize those sticky notes and the insights from the circle into themes, which were then drawn on to create future plans and visioning. So using some futuring work to make a simple news headline from 3 years into the future for what the organization had accomplished. Again, so the human rights themes there that this touches on, and just the idea of visualizations and metaphors and how impactful, useful those can be. And the circle work in particular, this is my first time engaging in circle work, and I found it to be incredibly helpful for just setting the scene and creating a vibe of trust within this group, and especially with me as a new person coming into this community. I found that really helpful. But I'll say too, the relationships with the NGOs who do take the time to have those long-term relationships with the people in the communities, that's super important. I still kind of grapple with helicoptering in as a designer, even though I'm a consultant, they want me to come in and do this stuff, but it's hard to reconcile that with this, like, because I know that a longer term relationship is better, but that's what I'm working on still. Quickly into the sort of systems change stuff. I don't have a lot of time left, but just to touch on some of the frameworks that I've been thinking about more recently and other projects that I'm doing. You'll see the double diamond is still a thing. The UK Design Council has now created a systemic design framework on top of that double diamond. And I think for me, what I want to highlight is this idea of relationships and connections that is identified as very important in systemic change work. Another systems change framework and group I'm looking at is the Collective Change Lab, and they have a framework here for creating conditions for relationality within systems change work, participatory work. I found this really helpful and did a bit of analysis of of my cases and just some of the thinking that I'm doing around design through that lens, without going into every single point. Again, this idea of long-term relationships I'll call out. Trauma-informed practices, I've heard that a few times in our talks. Serendipity and the sacred is an interesting one, and this is kind of like how can art-based methods and generative things facilitate systemic change? What is it about engaging with those methods that inspire people, or I don't know, it does something. I don't know exactly what it is yet. This idea of change, we just talking about this at lunch, it's like this work changes you. You can't really deny that. It's like you can't be an unbiased like observer in any of this. Like if it's deeply engaged in human rights issues, you're gonna be affected by it as a consultant or a researcher. And obviously the people who are affected already are affected by it. And so yeah, it's kind of this idea of inner and outer change that just being aware of that can help you be more relational. And then of course, power dynamics and centering lived experience, which is kind of the heart of this. I had a few kind of just like overarching thoughts that I thought might be helpful as recommendations or kind of provocations for the field. Thinking about framing intentionally toward human rights, I think it was Kate yesterday who was saying that this actually works. There's data that says like if you're focused on human rights within your deliberative engagement, and do the work, like the underlying work to make sure people know what they're working on, it can be effective in making more sustainable decisions together. So that's really cool. But yeah, just for myself, I'm like, well, those case studies weren't really framed as human rights issues when I was working on them. But I think if I had that lens, I might have done things differently. I might have been more intentional about, you know, what can these outputs do to contribute to advocacy, things like that. So this idea of orienting toward human rights or framing the work specifically around human rights is beneficial, at least to me in my field. Again, looking at frameworks, how can this framework or design contribute not just at a workshop level, but at a scalable level where you're looking at it as a meta framework for planning and making change and changing and revitalizing human rights frameworks at a larger level. Prioritizing relationality, fostering trust, doing this deep relational work that allows us to consider each other in a deeper way. And then evaluating as well with design frameworks. I like this model ideas, arrangements, effects, like looking at what socio-material arrangements make future participation possible. So doing like analysis of current human rights work with design frameworks might be helpful. And lastly, just to end with, how do you make the invisible visible? Like I've been looking a lot at this idea of infrastructuring as an approach in design, and that it invites us to, as designers and collaborators, design tools and systems that make future design possible. So it's not just designing a thing that then gets used. It's like, how can the thing support more design of the communities? And so it's this idea of like, what's underneath everything? What's holding up what you're trying to create? And I mean, this is a simple iceberg model. And I'm like, okay, well, human rights abuses, we're seeing that on the surface level. What's under that? There's a lot of levels to like patterns and trends, underlying structures and mental models lead to this. So what interventions can we make at these levels that could change what we see on the surface? using infrastructure as a strategy and of course centering the expertise with it. That's all. Thank you so much. And I think that we have Sadi next and Johannah. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, my dear family. I was supposed to be here with Johannah, and I hope she'll be able to just show her face and greet.
She's online.
She's online.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
Greetings, greetings from the Free State in South Africa.
There she is. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our presentation is actually focusing on, we are going to present a case study, and this case study is focusing on mobilizing it's actually deliberative democracy, particularly governance and human rights, but we are focusing on exploring deliberative democracy and mechanisms for inclusive governance, and then focusing on lessons that come from the Mfulatsane study. Now, the Mfulatsane study, Mfulatsane is a local municipality in Gauteng province in South Africa, and this emerged from a study that we did which was funded by the International Center for Local Democracy in Sweden, which was focusing on mobilizing assets to bridge the accountability gap, and also applying the asset-based community development for social accountability and inclusive governance in that particular municipality. Now, just briefly to say that when you talk about the ABCD, the asset-based community development approach is an approach that focuses on the strengths and the assets of people rather than on their needs and deficits. So can we go to, okay, let me just go to the next slide. And now that's the team. I think you can see Julian there from Cody in the center there. And that's the team that was doing the research. It includes Professor Nell from the University of Johannesburg. And the guy who's laughing here at the bottom, it's the director for public participation in local government. And then there's myself and my sister there. So that is the team that was facilitating this research. Now, we are focusing on what actually happened in this particular municipality based on the challenges that we experienced post the democratic the transition of government. So South Africa in 1994 transitioned from the apartheid system to become a democracy. But then there was hopes that were raised, but unfortunately, as time goes on, those hopes were rather dampened because of the things that were happening. Now, 3 decades down the line, we focusing on this on Africa, South Africa as a whole. There was an Auditor General's report that was produced early this year, and it reflected very, very serious challenges that actually for over many years, from 1994 up to date, where there's a reflection on the challenges that we are facing as a country. Irregular expenditures, there's a lot of challenges in terms of corruption, there's mismanagement of money and weak performance, as well as poor service delivery. Now, this is also worsened or exacerbated by political interference because there is deployment of mainly people who are supporters of the ruling government. Now, those people who are deployed, most of them do not have the skills and cannot run a municipality as a manager or as a financial person, but don't have the skills to do that. But it was mainly deployment that actually has caused such a lot of problems. And then there's also the issue of violence in democracy, the political killings. People seem to use, once you are a councillor, you want to become a councillor for life. And if there's another person who takes over, then the focus is just on just getting rid of those people. So there's a lot of political killings. And like I said the other day, at this present juncture, now we've got the Mandlanga Commission that is actually there to address the issue of disbanding the political killing task team, which is something that is really very, that is affecting governance in South Africa. Now we end up with citizens who are disillusioned, citizens who have lost hope. And at the end of the day, we see democracy being undermined, as well as inclusive governance. Those two critical pillars of democracy are undermined. Now, the focus is on Mfuleni municipality. Now, Mfuleni, we did our research in Mfuleni because Mfuleni is a municipality where, in 1960, there was the massacre of about 69 people who were killed when the police were actually, there was a fight, there was the police were shooting people who were protesting against past laws. So 69 people were killed in 1960. And therefore this Mfuleni municipality, which is in the Vaal area, was referred to as the cradle of human rights. And as it is, it was on the 21st of March, 1960. And now in South Africa, the 21st of March is Human Rights Day. Now, the challenges that are happening in that municipality actually made us to focus on it as a municipality that was once that respected because of what happened there and being seen as a cradle of human rights, but then lately becoming the violators of the very rights that they fought for. So we did a participatory action research study, which was in 2020 to 2023, and the focus was on exploring how the ABCD can be institutionalized in municipal governance to strengthen social accountability and inclusive democracy. Now, like I indicated, this municipality is called the cradle of human rights, but we see it now moving towards a test of democracy because there's very little that is happening there that symbolizes what we embraced as inclusive democracy. So what we experienced there in the ELM is that the human rights, there has been a degeneration from fighting for human rights from the Sharpeville massacre to violating the very human rights. And there's an issue of poor service delivery, there's corruption, there's weak accountability, and as the Auditor General's report stated, it's failure of a democratic promise and institutional breakdown. So Mfuleni case study actually shows how the ABCD, or the asset-based community development, and a right-based approach can restore trust, dignity, accountability, and inclusive governance in fragile systems. So we tried this, and hence we are presenting this case study just to share what the outcome was of using the asset-based development to engage, to facilitate inclusion. Because in the main, there's the Municipal Systems Act. The Municipal Systems Act has introduced the systems like the integrated developmental planning process, where citizens are supposed to be part of that process to inform the planning in their area, to inform whatever that the decisions that are taken. But we found out that people are not really included. It is simply the leaders or the mayor who would come and inform people and tell them that this is what we are going to do without people having engaged. And then they would actually just go into a hall and say, give us a wish list of what you want the government to do for you. And people will just give a wish list. But at the end of the day, that wish list is not even appreciated. What the municipality will do is what they have planned. So the ABCD was a way of trying to make sure that it's not the us and them situation. Citizens are seen as partners of municipalities so that they can start working together. And then now this is the situation in Mfuleni, and you can see there waste, and look at the roads, and people were just Mfuleni is now known as a municipality which is characterized by protests. It's just protest every day because people cannot live in situations like this, whereas they are paying taxes and they're also doing, what they've got to do as a community. So we see, communities that are excluded from engagement instead of being part and parcel of the engagement process. So now we're looking at how the ABCD could be able to support. So the methodology that we used, we actually had to we facilitated the ABCD workshops as well as the training of the facilitators. We did WhatsApp interviews because in 2020, when we started, it was during the COVID time, so we could not engage directly with the community. So we had to use WhatsApps to obtain information from the community. And then we used a multi-stakeholder reflective dialogues where it was the government, the community in one place, where we were now looking at how, there can be engagement between government and community without, the issues of power or, the us and them finding themselves in one place. And the outcome of that was what we call the asset-based informed community scorecard. Now, the traditional scorecard, it's actually a participatory tool, but it's a tool that is one-sided, because the traditional community scorecard is actually giving communities a voice, but the voice is actually of assessing the service deliverer. It's assessing the municipality without looking at their own responsibility. So when we introduced the ABCD, it then changed the way the community scorecard is implemented. Instead of communities assessing the municipality, they were also assessing themselves to say, we are partners. If the municipality cannot, what is it that we are doing even as a community? So the outcome of the whole engagement from introducing the ABCD to the communities, as well as the officials, as well as the training and all those discussions. At the end of the day, we then together with the community developed this ABCD informed scorecard, which is actually a model for inclusive participation and social accountability. Now, the process of developing the ABCD informed community scorecard started with training and preparation of the facilitators. Now, the facilitators included community members who were involved in the development, some of the development projects, because whether government was doing everything for the community, but there were also those initiatives that were driven by the people themselves. So we identified those community members who are actually doing something in the community and brought them in to start train them on how to facilitate processes that can ultimately lead to the development of the ABCD informed community scorecard. So post that, then there was the co-creation for an ideal integrated development plan. What are the processes that should for example, there was an inclusion of community-based planning, so that the community must start doing the planning themselves before then they can actually hand over that to the municipality. So there were dialogues that were held, separate dialogues between communities themselves and officials. And then at the end of the day, then we had an interface meeting where we brought the officials as well as the community in one room to have to develop a joint action plan, as to say, if these are the challenges, how do we get there as a collective, instead of the community just waiting for government to do certain things and then complaining. So that actually assisted, because now the meeting turned from a complaint session into a space where there can be collective planning and collective decision making. So and at the end of the day, there was then an implementing committee that was set up to focus on how that joint implementation plan is being implemented, and whether so it was the community that is now driving the plan. The joint action plan had specified what the role of the municipality is and what the role of the community is. So each and everyone knew what their roles were, and then the implementing committee, which included both community representatives as well as officials, were looking at the extent to which that joint implementation is being implemented. So this ABCD CSC process showed that with municipal commitment as well as inclusive participation and accountability, citizens can actually be moved from being passive recipients of services to becoming active partners. Because the situation has been communities just waiting and saying, where is government? Why is government not doing this? And then when you even look at the waste, communities would throw the waste. And when we ask them, well, why are you leaving your place like this? No, the municipality is not doing anything. So we are creating a job for the municipality, not aware that they are actually now contaminating their own area. And then so if what we also found was that the officials also started being free to be able to engage with the community, because there was that thing of holding back. So there was transparency and accountability that improved on the part of the officials, and then on the part of the citizens, they also became active participants in the process. So what we also realized is that when communities are aware of their rights and responsibilities, they can then become part and parcel of the creation of solutions. So the solutions are not only from the municipality, but they come actually with the solutions, and together with the municipality, they would then sit and develop a plan. So they would come up with 3 plans. The first question would be, what can you do without municipal support? Then the second question is, what can you do with minimal support? The third one is, what can you do without, where you need full support? So now where they can do something with their own, with whatever assets they have, they develop their own action plan and they monitor themselves, and the municipality is there to establish whether they're actually doing what they're supposed to do. Where they need minimal support, then that minimal support will be provided. But where it is full support that is required, where it is, for example, a technical thing, then that goes to the integrated development plan of the municipality so that it can be budgeted for. And then, what is it? No, I think I'm repeating this one. Yeah, the progress to date. So after the implementation of the development of this ABCD CSC process and testing it, we then continue to engage with the officials and the community to establish what is it that they are doing to date. So what they are doing now, they actually have started a process of working with communities to provide information for integrated development planning. Now, what you can see on the side here is where they were doing a SOAR analysis of the ward, and this was Ward 17. So they sent us the report to say, post the training and post the exposure, this is how we are using this particular approach. So they started first with facilitation of community-based planning, where it is the community themselves now who are mapping what they have. They identify what the challenges are, they map assets that they have, and they decide what it is that they can do with what they have, where do they need support, etc. And then now they did a SOAR analysis here to say, okay, what are the strengths in our community and what are the opportunities that we have? What are our aspirations as a ward and what are the results that we want to see? So now after they have done this, then they start now planning based on the strengths that they have and on the opportunities that they already have identified, and also are being informed by their aspirations as well as the results that they want to see. But there were challenges along the way, the challenges of institutional resistance. Now, because all these things depended also on the willingness of the municipality. Now, if the politicians are also not willing, then the officials are also, hamstrung. They cannot do what they want to do because there are challenges. And then there was actually that uneven response, particularly post-COVID. You would go to the municipality and find that there are no officials there, because now there is this approach of working from home. So everyone just works at home, and then you go there, there is no one. So there were very few people who were coming. And also the risk of symbolic participation, where people would simply just be used to say, just say you participated even if you didn't. So it was an issue of also tokenistic development and leadership instability. Today you've got this official, tomorrow they are gone. And today it's this mayor, tomorrow it's another one. So this instability also affected the process. But the most important thing is that the community themselves are continuing to drive the process without waiting for the municipality or for the officials to be there. So the biggest lessons there that we have learned is that asset-based community development informs community scorecard can firstly operationalize deliberative democracy by creating new spaces for citizen engagement, citizen-state engagement, and also simultaneously it strengthens community agency and state responsiveness. It's not only one-sided. Both the community and the officials and the state are working together. That issue of us and them has reduced a lot. So and now that is what is showing that there is shared responsibility, and shared responsibility can actually promote effective participatory governance. And then also that it has reframed these community meetings from complaints forums to being collaborative planning spaces. Now, the journey has taught us that the ABCD CSC is not just a participatory tool, but it is a mechanism for a transformative democratic process. And it can also move citizens, like we have indicated earlier, from being passive recipients to being active co-creators, while compelling governments to respond with transparency as well as accountability. And it also demonstrates that when citizens and governments share a governance responsibility, democratic participation can be deepened and human rights can also be actualized. So the lessons from the Mfuleni local municipality case study can be replicated also nationally as well as globally. Because what we have realized is that, especially in places like Kenya and other areas, they are using the community scorecard, but the focus is only on holding officials accountable without them holding themselves also accountable. So the ABCD CSC process has brought in that thing that people must not just hold others accountable, but they must also hold themselves accountable. So when something goes wrong and they go into the boardroom, there's no longer pointing of fingers to say, you should have done this, you should. All of them take responsibility because they have collectively developed the plan. Now, that is myself and Dr. Keikelame, after a long hard work of workshops and facilitation. Yeah, thank you. I think that is the end of the. Let me not end by not acknowledging the funders, the Swedish ICLD, as well as the University of Johannesburg, the Cody Institute, Proctor and Mfuleni Municipality, as well as the communities. You can find the research report on the ICLD website, as well as the case study and the policy brief. They are all on the ICLD website. Thank you.
I was just informed our third presentation won't be joining us, unfortunately. We have a little bit of extra time. I think maybe it'd be nice to take some questions for us, but maybe after that, we can also open up to questions for each other, things that have come up for you, like use some of the time to have more of an open discussion if you guys want to, or we can end early, have a longer break, which is be what happens in your strategy. Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Everyone's like, longer break. That was best.
I was gonna actually clarify about the last presentation in South Africa, and it didn't give the thing about the trash collection. So it says we were dropping more trash as a protest, or just cleaning up trash as a protest?
No, initially they were just throwing the trash because they are creating work for the municipality.
Okay.
But then, after work with them and the training, they actually established their own waste management system.
Okay.
And they are contributing money to buy the plastic bags. And they also the local, because when they do their asset mapping, firstly they do mapping of what they have. They look at the resources, what do we have? We've got money, because most of the time people would say we don't have money, we are poor. But then, when you say, okay, contribute 50 cents, I mean, from that social grant, you can contribute, 50 rands or whatever. They started contributing. So they rent their own truck, they buy their own plastics, and they then collect the waste, and they engage the municipality to say, we've placed the waste at a particular spot. So then you can then come with your truck and collect it. So it's actually, they have become, partners, instead of just waiting for the municipality to do it. And Dr. Johannah Keikelame can add, there she is.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Just to add on that part, we still continue to have conversations via WhatsApp, and some of them do send us pictures of how they used the waste, the sections where the waste was actually, where they were destroying and having littering, how that turned into vegetable gardens. So now they had to use those spaces to grow vegetables. Thank you. That's what I wanted to add.
So, thank you very much for your presentations. Just a very nice presentation. I think maybe I'll engage you later to learn more about it and see how we can do something also in our own small space. But the South African presentation, very interesting. So I have maybe focus on 4 things. So sustainability, how sustainable is this? Government participation and ownership. So after this, does it end here? And having lived in South Africa a bit, if the local government is not involved, then it's not going to go anywhere. So where does the government fit in here? Then corruption is a big issue. But I think you didn't talk about corruption. So where does it feature in here? Because you can do everything, but because of corruption, and like you rightly pointed out, it's job for the boys. So it's ANC empowered, he puts people there, even if they are not competent, they'll be there. And we know corruption is at the heart of this thing. So how do you tackle this to make the project successful? And also about transferability. Are there plans to transfer the project to the community to also own it or co-own it with the government, so that they hold the government accountable and themselves accountable, like you said, so that it will be an ongoing thing? Thank you.
Firstly, let me say, you can't boil a pot from the top. You can't make fire at the top and hope to boil the water in the pot. You've got to make the fire under the pot. Hence, the focus is on empowering communities. Because if communities are not empowered, they will keep on waiting. And this is the problem that we are facing in South Africa, because there was a lot of promise of a better life, but that better life, people are not seeing the better life. So instead of protesting, yes, here and there, you still find protests and whatever. But within the community, there are already those who are now driving this whole process. Like I said, that unless we make the fire at the bottom, it is the people who can change. So the people must not see themselves as not government, because government is the people themselves. And unless they are empowered to be able to have a voice and to act appropriately also, then nothing will ever be able to sustain itself. And then government partnership. What I said is that we've got officials and as well as the community working together. We've got what we call the RDP coordinators. The RDP is the Rural Development Planning, or the IDP, Integrated Development Planning coordinators. Now, those coordinators are from the community. So they are the ones now who are driving the process, because with corruption and all these other things that are happening, unless the community is empowered to do things for themselves, nothing will happen. So the sustainability depends on the extent to which the community can drive things themselves, which is what the event, like Johannah was saying, they have turned those areas where there was a lot of waste into parks, as well as vegetable gardens. And some of them are making, there's no concept that says there is wealth in waste.
Yeah.
So they are recycling and using the waste to make products. So that thing of there is wealth. So yeah, I don't know whether Johannah wants to add. It's the issue of sustainability and transferability also. Now, in terms of transferability, what we were doing in Mfuleni, because local government could see the benefit of that, we started engaging with other. Okay, yeah, she's showing the some of the bags. That is
I want to show, from Fanta. Yeah, explain Sadi there.
Yeah, okay. Now, here these wraps that wrap in a Fanta bottles. So they take those wraps and then they use them to make bags. They take these bargain for Simba chips. They make whatever, and they use X-ray plates to make shoes. And those shoes are then, donated to children who are in need in that. So it's not only, the Mfuleni initiative actually started growing into other municipalities because the picture, I showed that guy who was, he's the director of public participation in Gauteng. So then realizing the impact of the project in Mfuleni, then we went to other municipalities. It's just that with other municipalities, we have not documented to the extent that we did in Mfuleni. But the Gauteng is on board. There's several groups that are already on board.
Thank you for a great presentation. When I saw the bag, I was thinking that's an opportunity for corporate promotion there. I should be paying for that. Which brings me to my question, really, where is the private sector in all of this? I know the primary duty bearer, the primary responsibility is the municipality, is the government. But isn't there a role for beyond the promotion, which they should be paying for? I think that's a case that can be made there. Name and shame corporations into cleaning up their products after use. But what is the role? Does this process, your participatory mechanism, which seems to have worked quite well in relation to the public sector? Have you talked about how to bring the private sector or corporations? They also have a human rights obligation on board.
Yeah, they do. It's very difficult to penetrate the private sector. The private sector, and then I think it's because of the high level of corruption, and so there's us and them. Us, private sector is there, and the government is there, and the people are there. So there are those NGOs that are actually supporting, because even in this project, we were working with Planet. Planet, it is one civil society organization that is focusing on social accountability. So we worked with them here. When they get a little bit of funding, they complement what we have. But even in government, it's very few people who supported the approach, because people don't want to work themselves out of the job. They want to always be seen to be working, to be going to communities, but not really changing the livelihood of communities. It's simply just going there all day. So it was just this guy who happened to be at national, but now post the changing, when the minister changed, there's another one who still now does not understand this, and so you go back to square one. The only thing that makes us happy is that the communities are continuing. And like I said, that you cannot start, boil the pot from the top. Otherwise, if people remain disempowered, and helping is good, but over helping is also killing initiative. So we've got social grants, and most of the people are getting grants. They just sit and say, government will provide. you know, yeah. But private sector, they only work with people who've got names. If you don't have something on your next to your title, then they don't work.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it will be an area probably to explore because we talk about a revitalization of township economy. So if we have to you know, to do that, then private sector, it would really be important and an opportunity to you know, to work with or to see how we can penetrate the private sector into you know, helping people to enter the market with the products that they use from this waste which they develop from the waste. So I think there is an opportunity to explore how best can we really penetrate the private sector. More so that now we've got the government of national unity. Yeah, there are opportunities, even though there are still challenges within this new coalition government itself. But I think, you know, we must have hope and not lose hope. As long as communities have realized that dependency does not work, that they cannot just be dependent or on government, then I think there will be room for improvement. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for the inspiring presentations. Jesi, I'm also an enthusiast of design thinking and facilitation and trying to bring it to academia and to think how we can work it out. But one of the issues about the designs that you showed, I would be interested to see how do you imagine working those designs in contentious topics or opposing publics, opposing groups. How can we? Because most of the times we're working with like similar-minded people, or at least like part of a same group. But how can we do that when we are working with out-group differences and all those issues that make the discussion about human rights as it is? That our issue is not really we need to protect, it's who to protect, how to protect, and so when we get there, then get more diversity of opinions and maybe opinions that are contrary to each other.
Sure. I mean, there's a couple things. I think I've been in spaces where issues are contentious, but these methods, I think, are not necessarily, or that I haven't used them in like a setting where you're like engaging a public that might have a contrary opinion to, let's say, an opinion of a winner, you know, like, although I suppose that workshop had that opportunity, but it worked out that they ended up on the same page. But I think there's always a risk of that, I guess, if you're engaging a public with the community that might have a different view. I found that the circle strategy, the circle work was really beneficial, and like a project I worked on with the city of Vancouver. And I mean, there were voices that were a lot louder than others in those spaces, like people who've been working in civil society and nonprofit for a really long time and haven't seen any movement on the part of the city in the same room as city representatives, talking about how they can work together. And they're like, why am I even here? I've been invited to this space so over and over, and you haven't done a single thing to help me. And actually being in circle and having that, and then letting them talk 15 minutes, you know, despite the agenda, because they needed to get that out. The city's there, like they were forced to listen almost, you know, it's like, but it didn't seem like confrontational in that setting. It was just like, this is an honest space. So I feel like if you create space for honesty and really listen to each other, but it's, I don't know, I don't have a catch-all answer for that question. I do think it's really important.
Can I try something worse? Yeah, I think when we were engaging with the community, we used a little bit of the design thinking element. For example, they would have identified maybe 5 projects or 5 interventions. But then we would take them through a process that says, okay, if these are 5, then let us prioritize. And then what then have the criteria for prioritization. Is it affordable? Is it what the people would like? Or so those questions assist them to be able to come to a point that says, okay, out of these 5, this is the one that we can, based on the what the communities would like to have, but is it viable? Is it desirable? All those, look at that criteria. And then, and ultimately then we get, there would be those who say, no, that one, but after, having a discussion, because we also use the circle. And that's where we try to bring in cultural approaches to development. So we call it the Lokotla. So when people are sitting in the Lokotla, then, because you are sitting in a circle, you are sharing energy, you are sharing ideas, and you are all equal, whether you are, so at the end of the day, there's consensus about where to start and what to do at what point. So I think there's some element of that kind of giant thinking.
There's also the collaboration.
Yeah, the collaboration,
It's
yeah.
like when you, like the intention of a space is to work together on something, maybe it changes the energy that people bring to the space. Okay, well, it's gonna be hard and maybe have an opinion, but we're here to figure this out.
Like we would also do an interest and a skills audit or a talent audit to say now you attend here, what is it that you can do? And each and every one needs to tell that I can do carpentry, I can do a road work. I am, and everyone shares what they can do. And then at the end of the day, if the project is, let's say, the road that we saw, they want to repair the road, then we say, okay, I'll bring a wheelbarrow. I'll be able to go to use my truck to bring sand. So at the end of the day, everyone would have a road, and then they will all work together. And that in itself did not only help them to achieve a project, but also to build more, networks and cohesiveness in the community. Well, some of them would say, we never spoke, but through this process, at least now, the relationship have become stronger. So, and when these networks are strong, then people can actually achieve more because they've got now, they work together, there's consensus, and they're able to talk about issues.
Let's see more hands, unless anyone has more questions for us. So, yeah, sure.
I have some like abstract questions about design.
Sure.
I really enjoyed the presentation. Both presentations. Thank you for that. Just some kind of philosophical things popped up for me. I don't know while I was listening to your talk, and I really liked the example you gave of the hooks. It's amazing, very inspiring. And also the point you made about defining problems clearly. That's something I need to do. And I think as kind of human rights activists, sometimes we set these problems like in poverty or something like that. It's just having actually a definable problem. They can solve a lot of our issues. So I really appreciate all that. But just on the philosophy, I was struck by your idea that everything is design, and we're all designers. And I just wonder how far that goes, or the Serenity prayer about granting the serenity to accept the things that cannot change. The courage to change things that can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Like, are there things we should be trying to change in terms of systems? I mean, when we were talking about nature and the trees falling and so on, like, is there a design that we should just be at peace with, I suppose? And how do we know the difference when we get a design? And then the other question, these are just abstract kind of thoughts, I apologize. From Lawrence's presentation yesterday, there's this issue about, even very inclusive, very positive systems like Christianity and Islam and different religions that are by their design for everyone, they invite everyone. They are exclusive. And in some sense, every design is also an exclusion. In peace studies, Johannah had this concept of structural violence. And it was in your iceberg. You have, violence in a direct form, but behind that you have a design, you have a structure. And sometimes the real source of the violence is in that unseeable design. But then as soon as he articulated that, a lot of people have taken that and run with it. But Kenneth Boulding, another early peace studies professor, challenged him on it and said, well, doesn't all design, there is no social structure that doesn't fit your definition of structural violence. And the problem is, most of those systems were set up for good reason. They weren't set up to be violent, they're set up to solve a problem. But in solving that problem, they cause another problem that maybe is invisible. So then we have to redesign, and I haven't had a chance to talk to a designer about this problem. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Structural violence, maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah.
So there is like definition of structural violence, and structural violence is violence,
Yes,
but not everything structural is violence.
yes,
So just do
but yeah. The violence would be exclusion, would be different.
It's not direct violence.
Valuing things differently.
What I understood from what you're saying is everything structural is inherently
Just
include.
unequal. Inequality is a attribute of structure. So how do you solve that?
All right. Well, okay, for your first, that everything can be designed, I think, and I've thought about this too, I was like, should I put this on the slide, because everything can't be designed, we have nature. And I guess it depends on your philosophical view who designed nature, but the word thing and everything is kind of what I'm talking about, and structures are a thing. The built environment, the things that we engage with as human beings, the things we create as people, are the things I'm talking about when I say everything can be designed. And I don't know that it's possible to have a perfect design, personally. I think everything can always be improved, even if it's working pretty well. I think we're always worth checking in and seeing what can be done differently. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I think about it. And I don't know if I fully understand where we're coming from with this, but I do, and I'm sort of new to like unpacking this idea of what is structural violence and what are the infrastructures that are causing the problems we're seeing today. I'm not an expert in this at all. I just think it's probably useful to go there, so I think what you're doing is just going there, like, how do we think about this together? So I would open it up to everybody, at this point, because I can't answer that question. Like, how should we do that? What are the issues with that? And is it the design of the thing that comes out of the structure, or the structure itself? And is the structure designed? Like, yeah, yes to all of that. So, yeah, any other thoughts on this? And I mean, your talk was mentioned, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, oh, well. Oh, well, since I've mentioned, so.
You haven't mentioned.
Yeah, I understand what he tried to say about structural violence. Of course, not the physical violence, but that a structure that deliberately excludes certain persons or portions or groups within the society. It does not allow them. I'll give you an instance now. I lived in a town in northwestern Nigeria where you are told, well, nobody tells you, but when you apply for building licenses to build a church, you don't get it.
You
I
have
understand
to,
that there's structural violence. I didn't mean to say that there's no such thing. I understand the theory of structural
okay,
violence.
okay,
I'm not denying, I understand.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that not every structure is inherently violent.
no, I don't think that's what you said.
That's what I'm saying.
Was that what you were saying?
It depends on your definition of violence.
Okay, well, if you ask me, then I would, my response to that would be, well, we move to Hegelian theory of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So you design, there's a structure or a design, eventually, because of time, problems arise, then you design another one to be able to help solve the problem. It solves the problem, fine. It becomes like, well, that's the fusion, the synthesis. But after some time, it outlives its usefulness. And because the time changes and all kinds of things begin to happen, it becomes another cause for a problem. So which means the society or the structures are constantly in need of revision as we move. That's my own understanding of it, such that nothing lasts forever. And so it's a way of being able to, what it commands from the people who are involved would be a level of alertness, be willing to confront the challenges, but also with having it in mind that you're doing this not just because of the structures that you're put in place, policies there and there, but we're talking about the human beings that are involved. So the people there should be the focus as we try to improve every structure in order to build. And that also, in talking about that, to that brings the whole discussion about deliberative democracy, bringing people together. And I tried just to say, by way of saying, well done, the ABCD, that kind of caught my attention, that acronym itself. But then when you started explaining, it made a lot of sense. And in my opinion, that's in simple terms, the solidarity spirit that the communities must imbibe in order to see themselves as part of the structure. But again, that the principle of subsidiarity that tells you that you have certain capacities so you can do something, not only be independent. And that also builds into, I think there was an earlier presentation where we heard of dependent, independent, and then interdependence. All this building together, woven together in order to stress the importance of building a community. And for me, that's just it.
I think just to add on that, when you talk about, there would be, for example, a tension in the implementation of the asset-based community development in the current situation where you find that in a community, you've got local people, you've got foreign nationals.
Yeah.
And the principle of the APC is that everyone is included and everyone has a contribution to make. So there's no one who should be left out. So which means that you don't see yourselves as, I am South African, you are foreign. We are sharing this space. So it's important that we've got then to learn from each other. So when we facilitate this training, we ensure that people appreciate that. You can learn from others, they can also learn from you. So there's no one who is useless and everyone has to make a contribution. And where there are challenges of, because people fight for resources, they fight for this, but once they begin to realize that we can actually work together as a collective, then you are able to move to the next step and you break those tensions between who is who and who is not who.
To add like a theoretical discussion on violence, there's of course a very large body of literature on structural violence. There's a difference, which is kind of a subcategory of that, which is infrastructural violence, but that's more about physical infrastructures. And then if you want to talk, I think, for design aspects of domination or power relations. There's different work in semiotics and sociolinguistics, including about language ideologies. And there's then like people talk about rapid ideologies. And there's just different ways to approach that and think about it. That I think you really do that, but maybe it's just in different terminology. I don't know if those.
That'd be great. I'll catch you later and get those. We've got 15 more minutes. I would just like to open up the floor, like, to this community to see if anyone has any interesting reflections or something that they want to share as an observation about the conference as a whole. You know, it's kind of like on the fly, but we have a little time, and if there's something that's coming up for anyone, it's nice to have a little space for it.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate the varied perspective that we brought to this conference. That was always the intent, academic, but also as we see here, that bridge between research and practical approach to it, design, policy making. So just incredibly grateful for the variety of perspectives that we've had so far. It's been very engaging. So that's been my reflection. So thank you very much for this presentation.
Anything else? I'll share that I heard a lot of really great recommendations in all of your talks and like really cool ideas. And as a designer, that gets me excited. So looking forward to seeing what comes next from these discussions and the actual action that can come out of this work. It's really inspiring.